The Priest, the Painter and the Devil was the second film which I made for the BBC, which was seen in 1975. By then, of course, I'd done a great deal of my own research and the story was beginning to alter considerably. But even so, even then, I didn't know really what it was about.
Mystery and drama can sometimes lie hidden in the most tranquil of settings. And the most tantalizing of mysteries are those which speak of hidden treasure. This remote mountaintop village in southern France might well conceal that tantalizing X which marks the spot on a treasure map. Or perhaps it conceals something more. Rennes-le-Château hides a secret within its quiet walls. Its little church and unimpressive chateau watch over the centuries-old village where a mystery waits to be unraveled. The story of Rennes-le-Château involves a priest, a painter, and the devil. Once a great dark ages treasure of gold and jewels was somewhere in this area. Half of that treasure was carried to Spain, where in the last century these magnificent pieces were rediscovered. Many think the other half could still be hidden near the village. Others speak of the treasure of Solomon's temple, which the Emperor Titus carved onto his triumphal arch in Rome. Few who have climbed this hill have dug as deeply into obscure areas of religion and mysticism as Henry Lincoln, an English writer. In a previous chronicle, he told the strange story of Abbé Saunière, who came to this village as priest in 1885, whose account books show him to have been all but penniless. Yet in 1891, this penniless priest found a limitless source of wealth when he discovered in a hollow pillar in his church the key to wealth. That key was in some strange documents bearing passages from the Gospels, and hidden in the Gospel texts there were secret messages. For years, Henry Lincoln returned continually to the mystery of Rennes-le-Château, only to find the trails leading him on to Paris, where in 1891 the priest Saunière offered the parchments to skilled paleographers at the church of Saint-Sulpice. While he waited for the results of their research, Saunière made the most of his Parisian holiday. Somehow he made the acquaintance of the world-famous opera singer Emma Calvé, friend of the composer Debussy, and the relationship between the priest and the singer was to continue long after his return to his hilltop village. At last the experts at Saint-Sulpice were able to give Saunière what he needed. There was nothing now to keep him in Paris, except one brief and strange errand. At the Louvre, he bought a copy of a painting by Poussin. Les bergers d'Arcadie, the shepherds of Arcadia, then back to the village and suddenly riches enough to build this impressive tower. Here he installed his library and began to live his leisured, moneyed life. He entertained generously. Saunière was not a man to keep his newfound fortune to himself. For his villagers, he built this water tower to provide piped water to their homes, and he had the 3-mile-long dirt track to the village made over into a good modern road. For a long time, Henry Lincoln had followed trails which suggested that the mystery would be explained by an immense treasure. Now he feels he can explain everything, and that there is no longer a mystery to the life of the priest who for 30 years dominated the village with his presence, mystery, and fantastic wealth. Saunière's newfound fortune affected the lives of all his flock, but only one person shared his secret. She was his housekeeper Marie, his companion since the days of his poverty. Saunière died in 1917, but Marie lived on until 1953, and at last was laid to rest at his side. Marie knew, and Saunière knew. But for Henry Lincoln there was no easy way to their secret.
These village streets are now very familiar to me. But each time I walk the last few yards to the church, I find myself uncomfortably aware of that extraordinary and daunting inscription above the door, Terribilis est locus iste. This place is terrible. Are the words a warning? Or are they merely to make us aware that here we must expect the unexpected?
Everywhere, the church is covered with flamboyant, detailed decoration, slightly disturbing, slightly uncomfortable, and yet curiously lacking in atmosphere. The church has been sucked dry.
The statues seem blind and remote. There is a strange emptiness here, a confusing, puzzling, mysterious mass of detail, which seems to be trying to say something, though the voice is muffled. The total effect is almost overpowering. There is no delicacy here, rather a flamboyant expression of enormous vitality sliding towards bad taste. In its vulgar charm, it seems to be echoing the character of its creator, Béranger Saunière, the priest, who seems to be taking a delight in playing with us, giving us clues, like the irrelevant money bag that lies at the foot of the hill where Christ succours the afflicted, or like this hideous devil who awaits the visitor just inside the door. Is Saunière trying to show us what the parchments showed him?
Perhaps if we could read the secret messages, we too could be led to the source of Saunière's wealth. The first message, in fact, is very easy to find. It's on this parchment. Now, the first thing we notice about it is that it's very oddly arranged on the page.
The oddities stare one in the face, and their object is merely to say, you are right, there are secret messages, keep looking. And here is the first message, found quite simply by identifying those letters which are raised higher than the rest of the text and reading them off in sequence. Later messages will not be quite so easy to find, but this one is childishly simple. It says, à Dagobert de Roi et à Sion est ce trésor, et il est la mort. This treasure belongs to Dagobert II, king, and to Zion, and he is there dead. So the message makes it quite clear that we are dealing with treasure, and a treasure that belongs to Dagobert II, who is presumably the he who is there dead. Dagobert was one of the last kings of the Merovingian dynasty of France. He was assassinated in the year 679 AD. It is perhaps not impossible that a Dark Ages royal treasury could be hidden away here. But Zion is Jerusalem. And the treasure of Jerusalem, the treasure of Solomon's temple, was carried off by the Romans, who sacked the city in 70 AD, as this painting shows. Interestingly, this is also a work by Poussin, who will play a large part in our mystery. How can the treasure of Jerusalem possibly be linked with Rennes-le-Château?
Saunière proudly had the date of his original discovery, the discovery of the parchments, carved onto the pillar where he'd found them, 1891. But in fact, this pillar dates from the time of the Visigoths, a Germanic tribe who came from the east and settled in this part of the world. Their kingdom spread across southern France, over the Pyrenees and into Spain.
They kept part of their treasure, the booty from their many wars, at Carcassonne. And at Carcassonne we are barely 30 miles from Ayreda, one of their last strongholds as their power faded. And Ayreda is today Rennes-le-Château. And it was these same Visigoths who had sacked Rome in the year 410, and in their turn had carried off the treasure of Jerusalem. Are Saunière's parchments trying to tell us that this tiny village is the last resting place of Solomon's treasure? Certainly Zion seems to be emphasized as we examine them. Here it is simply reversed. And here, the odd breaking of words at the ends of lines spells it out again. Obviously, the word has some significance. But before we accept Zion as Jerusalem, something else must be considered. These letters P.S. They figure again here on a strange grave inscription. My researchers had thrown up several times the name Priory of Sion. Could this be the meaning of P.S.?
Are we in fact not talking about Jerusalem, but about this mysterious priory? And if so, what is it? Well, one answer would seem to be some sort of secret society or order. And this thought leads to another fascinating possible trail. Many secret orders claim some descent from or connection with the Knights Templar, a religious military order founded by a group of French knights in 1119.
Their declared object was to safeguard the highways for pilgrims and to retake the Holy Land for Christianity. Their name, Templar, comes from the establishment of their order actually on the site of Solomon's Temple in Jerusalem. And for many years they fought valiantly against the Saracens in the name of Christ.
How do the Templars figure in the story of Rennes-le-Château? Well, across there, on the other side of the valley, is the Château of Bézu. It was a Templar castle.
By the end of the 13th century, the Templars' objective, the recapture of the Holy Land, was no longer a practical possibility. They were a highly trained and efficient body of fighting men who owed allegiance only to the Pope, and so they were a threat to the power of the French king. In addition, the order was extremely wealthy, and a much more obvious reason for King Philippe le Bel to act against them was his need to lay hands on their gold. To arrest the Templars, the king sent out sealed orders to his seneschals all over France. These orders were to be opened and acted upon simultaneously throughout the kingdom. The Templars everywhere were to be arrested on the morning of the 13th of October, 1307. The plan appeared to be a success. The Templars fell into the trap, were tortured, and many at last went to the fire. But although the order was suppressed, one group of Templars completely escaped the king's net. They were the Templars of Bézieux, and the treasure of the Templars has never come to light.
The treasure of the Temple of Jerusalem? The treasure of the Visigoths? The treasure of the Templars of Bézieux? 3 different treasures, or just one treasure being constantly exploited? But the possibilities are not exhausted yet. No one ever denied that the Templars fought and died valiantly for Christ, and yet one of the accusations made against them at their trial was that they denied Christ and trampled on the cross.
Here at Montségur, we have come a mere 35 miles from Bézieux and Rennes-le-Château.
There, on that hillside, on a March day in 1244, 200 men and women were burned. They died for their heretical beliefs. They also denied Christ. Who were they? And how do they fit into our story?
They were the Albigensians. They believed simply that there were 2 gods, that all flesh, all matter, was the work of the devil, the god of evil, and that only the soul was of God, the God of good. They believed that God was not the omnipotent creator of all things, and that in fact he was incapable of creating physical matter. Now this thought that God could not create physical matter led to the idea that Christ, the Son of God, created by God, could not be physical, and so as pure spirit he could not be crucified. And so the Albigensian heresy leads us to an acceptance of Christ the Son of Mary, but a rejection of Christ crucified. For the Albigensians, the world was ruled by its creator, the god of evil, Rex Mundi, king of the earth, and only by living a life of purity could a believer achieve oneness with the God of good. The heresy took a strong hold in this part of France, and it was necessary to put it down. A crusade was preached against the Albigensians, and a long and bloody war took place. At last, here at Montségur, the last remnants of the faith took refuge.
At the beginning of March 1244, on this lonely mountain, the position of the besieged heretics was hopeless. They parleyed with their attackers and were granted surprisingly lenient terms. For those who would abjure their faith and return to the church, there was life and freedom. Only the obstinate were to go into the fire. And most astonishingly, they were granted a 2 weeks' truce in which to make up their minds. During that time, no one was to enter or leave the castle on peril of having the lenient terms withdrawn. And yet, during those 2 weeks, 3 men climbed down from this incredible pinnacle and slipped away. They carried with them, it was said, the treasures of their faith. Whatever it was, in helping them to escape, those who remained behind were risking their own lives. What could it have been? After all, 3 men can't carry very much, especially when they have to scramble down a sheer mountainside on the end of ropes. It's been suggested that the treasure was a spiritual one.
For the Albigensians, there was no spiritual truth in Christ crucified. But could that heresy have survived the flames of Montségur?
This cross is in the porch of the church of Rennes-les-Bains, just a mile or so away from Rennes-le-Château. It was put up in 1856, and it is, to say the least, unusual. There, where we should expect to see the body of the crucified Christ, is the Virgin and Child.
Has the heresy survived? The substitution on this cross seems to be expressing that seemingly long-forgotten faith. What other strange trails were revealed to Saunière?
We've already read one message in the parchments. What more can they tell us? Well, to read the next message, we need a key. And the key is somewhere else.
Or it was. Under this arch is a gravestone. It once covered the grave of Marie de Negri, Dame de Blanchefort. Featureless now, the inscription that was carved onto it is gone, effaced by Saunière himself. The headstone to that same grave has completely disappeared, but that also once carried an inscription that was interesting. And it was here that the key to the decipherment lay. The trouble that Saunière took to scrape away these words was wasted. The stones had already been recorded in a little book published some years before. Almost every line on this headstone has a mistake of some sort, and it is on these errors that we must concentrate in order to find the key to the next secret message. In the first line, CG, here lies, has been written with a T, not an I. The last letter of noble becomes a small round E instead of a capital letter. The M of Marie has been broken off. The last E of Negre again becomes smaller than the rest of the text, but this time it is a small square E. Darl should read dables, so an R instead of a B. On the fourth line, another small square E. Further down, a P has been curiously dropped out of place, and again it is written small. In the date 1781, what should obviously be a C has been written as an O. These, then, are the elements of our keyword, simply concealed. 8 letters have been picked out, 4 large and 4 small. The large ones, T, M, R, O. There is only one word that can be formed, mort, death. The small ones, a round E, a pair of square E's and a P. Again, only one word can be found, épée, a sword.
So mort épée is our keyword. The man who created this cipher was playing an elaborate game. A game which taxes the brain as much as a well-played game of chess. And in fact, this chess piece will help us unravel the most unexpected and startling of our messages. Unexpected and mysterious.
Having realized that our keyword is to be mort épée, we must then turn to our second parchment, which is a gospel text into which 140 extra letters have been inserted. From these 140 letters, we reject the middle 12, which stand out as the only ones raised above the lines of writing. The remaining 128 letters are then laid out according to one of the standard code-making systems, that known as the tableau de visionnaire, in order to read off our message. This operation may seem technical and highly complicated to explain, but in essence is simple to operate and well known to code breakers. The key word mort épée is repeated over and over again above the coded letters. The visionnaire system then operates quite simply. The key letter M changing the coded V into an H. The key letter O changing a C into a Q. Similarly, the key letter R changes a P into a G, and so on. But we can already see that this decipherment which we are attempting is not going to give us a simple answer. The new letters as they appear are as meaningless a jumble as the ones that they replace. As we shall see, this cipher will prove to be so incredibly complex that the mere concealment of a message cannot explain it. There seems almost an element of ritual involved, the sort of ritual one might expect if we are dealing with secret societies. The decipherer must thread a complicated and precise maze in order to reach his goal. I am making no claim to have broken this fantastic code myself. The key was given to me in France, with the claim that the code had been broken by computers. The thought that this whole cipher might be an elaborate practical joke was ruled out when cipher experts in England assured me that the code, though complicated and perfectly workable, does not present a valid problem for a computer and would need months of work to prepare. As you will see, the complexities will become even more confusing. The only way to break this code is to have the key to the ritual. But now, let us take the next turn in the labyrinth. The new letters we have found are meaningless. We must now go back to the start and shift one place down through the alphabet, so that the first letter H becomes an I, Q becomes R, etc. And this new string of letters still makes no sense. The next step is to take this new jumble of letters with a new keyword. This new keyword proves to be the entire text of the headstone on the left. And from the gravestone on the right, we take PS and Pricum. We now use the tableau de visionnaire again, but using the new keyword backwards, ending with PS, Pricum. Yet another series of letters, and still there is no message. And this time, our shift down the alphabet is 2 spaces, so that a V becomes an X, an L becomes an N, and so on. But still, the letters are meaningless. The next step is extraordinary. We must take these, the fourth meaningless jumble of 128 letters, and divide them into 2 groups, 64 and 64. Taking the first group of 64, we lay them out on a chessboard. Then, having selected the correct starting square, we make the only sequence of knight's moves which will cover the entire board, touching each square only once. And now, at last, our clear message begins to form. We read the second 64 letters by using the same pattern of knight's moves, but reversed mirror fashion. And here, complete, is our hidden message. The most surprising and convincing thing about the validity of this decipherment is that after so many letter changes, the final message is a perfect anagram of the text of the headstone which provided the keyword. Shepherdess, no temptation, to which Poussin Teniers hold the key. Peace 681. By the cross and this horse of God, I complete this Démon Guardian at midday blue apples. The message may now be readable, but what does it mean? Much of it I am still unable to explain, but I can clarify one part, which takes us right away from our mountaintop village. The cipher names 2 painters of the 17th century, Poussin and Teniers. How can they hold the key?
Can the words lead us to specific paintings by these artists? Shepherdess and Temptation. In fact, Shepherdess is a simple link to Poussin's Bergers d'Arcadie, the Shepherds of Arcadia, which hangs here in the Louvre in Paris.
A shepherdess, in the company of 3 shepherds, contemplates a tomb in a pastoral idyllic landscape. On the tomb is written the inscription, Et in Arcadia ego. Even in Arcady, I, death, am present. And this links us again to one of the gravestones effaced by Saunière. The link is obvious yet disguised. It is in the two outer vertical columns of letters. The left-hand one seems to be bad Latin. The right-hand one, Greek, but they make no sense until we realize that they are in fact both Latin, and both written in a form of the Greek alphabet. If we transliterate, we have et in Arcadia ego. Within sight of the graveyard of Rennes-le-Château is this strange structure. It is the tomb of Poussin's painting. Even the round stone on which the shepherd rests his foot is still in its place. Art historians have always thought that this tomb and landscape were imaginary. But can they be right? The match is precise, except that the mountain to the left of this rocky crag rises gently, but in the painting it falls. I shall come back to this later. Nearby is the hilltop on which are the ruins of the Château of Blanchefort, and it is accurately reproduced in the painting. And the most amazing detail, as we stand before the tomb, on the horizon to the right is a small hill, exactly placed by Poussin. It is the hill of Rennes-le-Château. Could our mystery really involve Poussin?
One curious, oblique piece of evidence does show up. A letter. It was addressed to Nicolas Fouquet, who was superintendent of finances in the court of Louis XIV. Sent by his brother, who had just paid a visit to Poussin in Rome. It's dated the 17th of April, 1656. Now, this letter has never been fully understood, and in part it says this: "He and I discussed certain things, which I shall with ease be able to explain to you in detail. Things which will give you, through Monsieur Poussin, advantages which even kings would have great pains to draw from him, and which, according to him, it is possible that nobody else will ever rediscover in the centuries to come. And what is more, these are things so difficult to discover that nothing now on this earth can prove of better fortune, nor be its equal."
So Poussin had a secret which kings would have pains to draw from him. Was it the secret of Rennes-le-Château? Certainly the link is there, and it is made by his shepherds of Arcadia. Of all his works, it is this one which is reproduced, sculpted in stone, here on his tomb in Rome. Poussin's secret. It was in following that trail that I began to question whether the mystery of Rennes-le-Château could be simply one of a treasure hidden in a small French village. For that trail led me far from Rennes-le-Château and to a most unexpected place, Shugborough Hall, in Staffordshire, in England.
Here, in the grounds, is another Berger d'Arcadie in stone. But this time, the figures are reversed mirror fashion, and underneath there is a cipher. No one has ever satisfactorily explained the meaning of these letters.
This strange monument was erected in the 18th century, and no one could tell me exactly why. Might not the search for some hidden significance be inflating a simple coincidence into a bizarre extension of the mystery of Rennes-le-Château? The simple answer to that question would have been yes, if Shugborough had not also held another vital link in our chain of clues. Poussin's Et in Arcadia ego theme seems to have had significance here. In the house is a copy, not of the painting we have seen in the Louvre, but of another version which he painted some 10 years before. The original painting from which this copy was made is in the collection of the Duke of Devonshire at Chatsworth House in Derbyshire. Remember that shepherdess had been linked with Poussin in our elaborate ciphered message. But the Poussin shepherds were not all that I found at Shugborough. The message had also referred to Teniers and no temptation. This had always seemed to be a link with Tenier's many versions of the temptation of St. Anthony. But no temptation was odd. However, at Shugborough there was one more copy of a 17th century painting, and it was a copy of a Teniers. Not the temptation of St. Anthony, but St. Anthony and St. Jerome, the only St. Anthony theme in which he is not being tempted. Pas de tentation, no temptation. And as confirmation, in the background there is a shepherdess. Shepherdess, no temptation. Poussin and Teniers hold the key. Coincidence can only go so far. So Shugborough confirms the links between the painters and their works which were indicated by the ciphered message. The Poussin has provided us with many more tangible clues than the Teniers, so I concentrated on that. Remember, when we looked at the real landscape, how there was a mountain slope behind the tomb which is not there in the painting. But a line of cloud seems to match that slope. I had to go back to Paris to find out if Poussin had originally painted the mountain and then altered it to cloud. I realized that the X-ray pictures at the Louvre would reveal the truth. And the truth was disappointing. There are no basic alterations in the picture. But a tiny detail in another part of the painting, which only the X-rays could reveal, suddenly caught my eye. One would expect a picture to be built up from background to foreground. One expects that Poussin would have painted first the landscape, then sketched in the tomb, and then the foreground figures. But here he seems to have done something strange, and it doesn't show on the surface painting. Look at this shepherd's head. Now that we can see the underpainting, it is clear that the line of the stick held by the shepherd is cut off by the line of the top of the tomb. Clearly the staff must have been painted first. Why? One does not expect an artist to work from the foreground details backwards. Having noticed that the staff appeared to have been painted first, I examined it more closely, to find that the line of the shepherd's arm divides the stick exactly in two. This precise half-staff measurement is exactly repeated on the other staff, and here, and here, and in fact in dozens of other places. A curious geometry was beginning to show itself. I needed expert advice. Professor Cornford of the Royal College of Art undertook to analyse the picture.
As I worked on the painting, it did seem to me to become evident that there was present in the geometry of it the figure of the regular pentagon.
This was a complete surprise. Why? Such a system had been discarded centuries before Poussin's time, so what could the pentagon signify?
That is a very ancient symbol which basically has been regarded as both good magic for protection against evil spirits, hence the use of the five-pointed star by people doing magical operations in order to exclude, I think, unwanted spiritual presences from what they're doing. It was also the cult symbol of an ancient religion dating back to 600 BC in South Italy, presided over by, or originated by, Pythagoras. When I saw this from a little way back, I did seem to detect somewhere in this area the presence of what could be a regular pentagon and the angles of the pentagon, and this prompted me to look into the question of what shape Poussin had chosen as the rectangle for his painting.
Moving away from my measurements, he established convincing evidence for pentagonal geometry, as the format chosen by Poussin is exactly that rectangle which bears a very particular relationship with the regular pentagon. It is one of the rectangles whose proportions relate to the golden section, the harmonious division of a picture much used by classical painters. That golden section division here defines the position of the shepherdess. Painters of Poussin's time used the golden section as one of the ways of subdividing the area of the canvas. Professor Cornford was not surprised to find this system of harmonious division, but what startled him was the pentagon, and that it was not within the painting, but governed its form from without. And this could only result from Poussin's choosing a precise ratio of height to width for his canvas. The next step was to join the opposite points of the pentagon. This makes a 5-pointed star. Every Old Master painting previously analysed by Professor Cornford had conformed to straightforward subdivisions of a rectangle. The Berger d'Arcadie was quite different. The centre of its governing pentagon is simply found. The pivotal centre is the mind of the shepherdess. She dominates the picture as the pentagon dominates her position, defined by a system which for some reason Poussin had resurrected from the past to bring into the 17th century.
I was surprised that this should be so, because I would have expected Poussin to have associated himself with the Renaissance philosophy in this matter, rather than to have used the older method. I was also surprised at the degree to which it was possible to conform with both methods simultaneously, almost like a musician writing in 2 keys at once and making them both harmonize, extraordinary feat of virtuosity. And I was frankly surprised at what seemed to me the quite staggering rigorousness and exactitude with which Poussin seemed, to me anyway, to have observed both of the constructions that he used, but rather particularly the second one that I've mentioned.
And the Poussin pentagram is not the only one which has appeared. My search for significant geometry began when I found this device concealed on this document, and again it is the pentagram, the symbol used by disciples of the occult within which they perform their magical rites. If Poussin is indicating anything here, it is the mystic pentagon. The creative force seems to radiate from the shepherdess's mind. Does she echo the Albigensian belief that all physical matter created is the work of a god of evil? Over the centuries, the influence of the occult has waxed and waned. And at the turn of the century, Saunière's time, as again now in the 1970s, the power of magic was for some minds a potent, attractive force which they tried to harness. Long months of work have gone into the unravelling of all these ingenious clues, but my fascination with these puzzles and preoccupations with thoughts of treasure had obscured the simple truth which now seems to me to lie behind Saunière's sudden wealth. That truth seems to lie in the realm of the occult, of which these age-old symbols are relics. The parchments themselves make no great effort to hide a key to that truth. Yet again, this document picks out more letters, easily identified by their small size. They spell out, quite simply, Rex Mundi, King of the Earth, an epithet applied to the devil, the Albigensian creative god of evil whom Saunière placed in his church. Many theories have been put forward concerning the significance of this figure, but I realized that the meaning of the whole statuary group was simple and quite startling. Rex Mundi, King of the Earth, supports the holy water. Above that, there are salamanders, creatures of fire, and crowning all, the 4 angels, creatures of pure spirit or air. What message was Saunière trying to pass on? What statement was he making? Air, fire, water, and earth. The 4 elements of alchemy. Again, imagery of the occult placed here by a 20th century priest, and just outside the church is the chateau, whose round tower is called the Tower of Alchemy. We are told that the alchemists were searching for a way to convert base metal into pure gold. But this was only a physical counterpart of the true alchemist's search for a way to transmute base man, creation of the devil, into pure spirit at one with God. Here, at the Bibliothèque Nationale in Paris, there is an obscure little book of great interest to searchers for the truth of Rennes-le-Château. There are pages of detailed family trees which attempt to establish a line of descendants from King Dagobert II, to whom Sauniere's supposed treasure is claimed to have belonged. But on another page, there is a fascinating list of names, which includes that of the most famous alchemist of the Middle Ages, Nicolas Flamel, listed here at number 16. Other equally remarkable names appear. Number 20, Leonardo da Vinci. Number 27, Isaac Newton. And finally, Victor Hugo, Claude Debussy, Jean Cocteau. What do these famous men have in common, at least according to this list? Let me remind you of the mysterious letters P.S., which were on the Blanchefort gravestone and on one of the parchments. I suggested that they might possibly represent a secret order, the Priory of Sion, and this list of names is of the alleged Grand Masters of that order, an order which this document claims was founded by the Knights Templars themselves, the Templars who were accused at their trial of denying Christ and trampling on the cross. On another page we find this strange coat of arms, which makes yet one more link in our chain of clues. Beneath it there is the motto, Et in Arcadia Ego. The link with the sculpted monument at Shagbara, copy of the Poussin painting, which shows the tomb near Rennes-le-Château, where this gravestone was effaced by Saunière, who compounded a mystery in his church, where a hollow altar pillar had hidden cryptic parchments which spoke of the devil whom Saunière placed in his church. This priest, who from penury became rich, and yet stayed to minister in the little village church above whose door he had carved the warning that this place is terrible. Did Saunière's riches come from treasure? Wealthy and distinguished people visited him. Is it possible that some of them, who provided him with all he needed, were his fellows in a secret society of the occult? On his deathbed, he made a confession that profoundly shocked the priest who heard it. Did he admit that, though a priest, he acknowledged, like his heretical forebears, the supremacy of the devil? He knew that after his death, people would speculate on and search for the source of his wealth. And that search has led me down a tortuous trail. For too long, I had threaded a labyrinth, at the heart of which was a simple truth. Simple, obvious, and staring.
So I thought I'd solved it. How wrong I was. It's a very good example of how you get to a point in your researches and you think you come to an understanding of the problem. And so there I am on the screen, captured for all eternity, saying, I've solved it. But it wasn't many years later before I was making a third film saying, don't think I got it right then. Still got a way to go. And I can promise you this. The more you dig in, the more you think you understand, the more you get pushed closer to a realization that you really don't understand anything.